2 o'clock silence can be louder than any siren, especially when the betrayal comes from the other side of your pillow. A phone held like a dagger, a whisper steady as a scalpel. Yes, he's here. I was 78 when Phoenix finally learned my secrets, none of them from me. I dozed off in my recliner, TV on low, a baseball game bleeding blue light across the living room. The AC hummed. The desert pressed its hot hand against our windows. And from the hallway, my wife's voice moved like a quiet river through the dark. Yes, Linda said, level and calm. He has no papers. He's in the house. Come as soon as you can. The sound came down the hall and found me like it had been looking for me all this time. I didn't even move. I just watched the light of the TV break across a family photo on the wall, one of those stiff studio shots with grins that were too full of teeth. Linda's smile in that photo had always felt permanent. I guessed everything could be removed if you wanted it badly enough. They knocked at sunrise, as if the sun itself had a warrant. Boots on concrete, fists against wood. I was halfway to the door, barefoot, when it opened, and the uniforms moved past me like the desert wind, impersonal, efficient, inevitable. There was no time to explain, to reason, to ask Linda why she smelled like coffee and victory. She stood behind them with her arms folded, steady, like she'd rehearsed it. Like I was a couch being hauled away. "Sir, we need you to come with us," one of them said. "We have a report." "I'm right here," I said. "No need to shout." I wasn't thinking about law or country or borders, not yet. I was thinking about the sound of Linda's voice while I slept. I was thinking of the way she didn't flinch when they cuffed me in front of our children, who'd arrived late the night before, because Linda had texted them that we needed a family talk. Ethan slid to her side as soon as he saw the cuffs. He has his mother's jawline and her ability to make a room hinge around his moods. Mason folded his arms, a mirror to Linda. Nora's expression was a blade. Only Grace, my youngest, stepped forward, eyes bright with shock. "Dad," she said, and Linda stopped her with a look so exact, so icy, that it made a sound only I could hear. Ethan smirked. "Should have happened years ago," he said. "You've been dead weight." The cuffs felt like a joke until I couldn't scratch the itch on my wrist. I kept thinking of drywall dust and rebar, and the day my hands learned to hold hammers like prayer. I kept thinking of rent checks and grocery bags, and the nights I fell asleep in my work boots because I had to be up again in 4 hours. None of that mattered now. Not the backyard I poured by hand, not the roof I patched after a monsoon had its way with our street, not the name Cole on a mailbox that I had painted steady as a heartbeat. Neighbors peered between blinds. The desert was wide awake now, streaked with heat. I walked under it, inside the sharp blue of a Phoenix morning, and climbed into the back of a white van. Linda didn't cry. I thought she might. She was composed, a woman whose errands were being completed. 50 years reduced to a line item on a to-do list. The detention center was colder than the desert knew what to do with. They took my belt and my shoelaces and gave me a blanket the color of old paper. A guard told me my rights in words I had once known and then let atrophy. I nodded because nodding was the only thing I'd never been told I was doing wrong. At midnight they handed me a phone. I dialed the house. It rang twice. "Linda," I said. My voice sounded younger than I felt, like an old tape playing in a new machine. "Don't call again, Henry," she said. "There's nothing for you here. Everything you think is yours is mine, and my kids stand with me." She said, "my kids," not our kids. I felt that like a nail driven into seasoned wood. They flew me out before dawn. I watched the desert become a map, then a story, then a secret. I watched the wing bite the sky. My eyes didn't water. Maybe I'd run out. The memory of Grace's face was a match I kept striking in the dark. In the terminal on the other side, no city name, just fluorescent light and vending machines that ate coins. I sat with my small, tired suitcase, the same one I'd bought at a thrift store in Mesa in 1981. It had carried my work clothes across decades. It knew every hallway I'd ever slept in. I pressed it to my knee and listened to the loudspeaker mangling last names I didn't recognize. I had the sensation of being a package that had been delivered to the wrong address and left on a curb. I dialed Grace. She picked up on the first ring. "Dad, where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm sitting under a sign that says nothing to me," I said. "I'm fine enough." Her breath steadied. "Listen to me," she said. "I'm coming to you, and there's something you need to know." "What's that?" "You didn't leave empty-handed," she said. "You left protected. Years ago, when you were worried about Mom's spending and the way Ethan talked, you set up a trust, the house, the accounts. You put them in my name with a lawyer in Tempe. It's ironclad. They can remodel all they want, but they can't sell a lock without me." The fluorescent light suddenly seemed warmer. I remembered a spring afternoon, an attorney's office with a fake ficus and diplomas on the wall. The lawyer had a careful mustache and a voice like a promise. Grace was there, chewing a nail, hair in a messy knot, still in scrubs from the clinic. I'd signed papers with a pen that had weight to it. I'd felt disloyal then. Now I felt alive. "You're sure?" I asked. It sounded like a prayer. "I'm sure," she said. "And Dad? We're getting you back, legally. I've already called someone who owes you. He said he remembers you. He said you once pulled him out of a mess when he was a scared kid trying to cross to get to college. He's an immigration attorney in Phoenix now." I closed my eyes, bowed my head, and let the hum of the terminal wash over me. I was 78, barefoot in places that had names and rules I barely remembered, but my daughter's voice was a rope thrown down into a well. I wrapped both hands around it. That night I slept in a chair with my suitcase as a pillow. Somewhere a TV laughed at the wrong time. Somewhere a child asked a question parents didn't know how to answer. I pressed my cheek to old vinyl and made a vow I'd make again and again. I won't let them erase me. I won't be a rumor in my own life. At dawn I bought coffee with wrinkled bills and watched the world pass by on wheels. I waited for Grace. I waited for the sound of my name said by someone who still meant it. And I waited for the moment I'd stand in a Phoenix office, cool air and brighter lights, and watch Linda learn math the hard way, that nothing times everything is still nothing, and that a deed with your name not on it is just paper you're holding for someone who still loves the man he used to be. If you've found me in this story, if any of this feels like a street you've walked down, tell me where you're listening from. Drop your city in the comments so I can see the map of all of us. And if you want more stories like this, go ahead and like the video and subscribe. I'll keep talking as long as you keep showing up. Grace found me the way daughters do, by scanning a room until the world falls away. She came in with a small carry-on and a larger resolve. The terminal smelled like bleach and pretzels. When she hugged me, I felt that old picture frame inside my ribs tilt back onto its nail. "Let's get you a shower and a bed," she said, like it was the simplest thing. We split a lift to a cheap hotel near the airport, carpet patterned like the memory of waves, HVAC that clicked every 7 seconds as if to prove it was alive. Grace paid at the counter. I argued. She stared. I lost. Steam in the bathroom made a small cloud of mercy. I watched brown rivulets disappear down a drain as if they were something I could send home. While I dried off, Grace spread papers across the end of the bed. "Okay," she said, "here's the frame." She had tabs and highlights and a yellow pad full of square letters. The trust had been drawn up with contingencies and backups. The house was in the name of an entity with Grace as trustee. The accounts were locked down with dual signatures. A title company in Tempe had copies. The attorney, Ben Hollis, had already replied to her midnight email with a line that made my chest go hot. "I remember your father. He kept us safe when safety felt like a myth. You think Linda knows? I said. She knows what she wants to know, Grace said, which is usually the most dangerous kind of knowing. It was afternoon when my phone buzzed with a call from Mason. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail anyway. I listened on speaker with Grace there, like she could steady me if the words did what words do. "Where are you?" Mason said. His voice clipped, a little too loud. "You made Mom do this. You know that, right? You forced her hand. Ethan says you brought this on yourself. Nora just doesn't want to talk to you. Don't call us again." Grace reached over and stopped the message. "You don't have to carry every word," she said, "just the ones that tell the truth." That night she ordered burgers and made me eat half of mine even though my stomach was a fist. Then she talked me through the plan like a surgeon rehearsing steps. "Phase 1, she said, ticking off items. "We stabilize you where you are. Phase 2, we get you back legally. Ben thinks there's a path based on years of residence and contributions. Phase 3, we let them set the trap for themselves. They'll try to sell, we'll be polite. Then we'll bring the documents to the table and let the law do what it's supposed to." "And Phase 4? I asked. She took my hand. "Phase 4 is you sleeping in your own bed with the door locked from the inside." I lay awake that night listening to the HVAC click. In the morning, I walked the hallway before sunrise, counting doors, letting the numbers calm me. I passed a vending machine that hummed like a choir of bees. Somewhere, a TV told lies about the weather. I imagined Linda at our kitchen table with Ethan and Nora and Mason clustered around like satellites. They were probably talking about granite and paint colors and the price per square foot of a life they didn't build. I tried not to imagine it, and failed. Grace's phone lit up with texts while we ate breakfast in the lobby. Ethan, crisp and businesslike. Nora, spiked with cruelty that she mistook for strength. They told Grace to stay out of it. They told her she was weak. They told her they were doing it all for Mom. They told her I had never done anything for them. Grace scrolled, her face still. She took screenshots and sent them to Ben. "Document everything," she said, mostly to herself. At noon, we met Ben in a conference room on the second floor of a building that sold insurance and optimism. He hugged me like a man who remembers being 17 in a world that wanted him erased. He thanked me. I wanted to tell him I hadn't done much back then, just hid him in a job site trailer for a night when some men with badges who didn't care about badges were looking for him. But he made it sound like a rescue. Sometimes the thing you think was small saved someone's life. He laid out the legal path. It wasn't simple, but it wasn't impossible. "You have time on your side," he said, "and you have the truth. We'll petition. We'll present your record. We'll talk to old employers. We'll build the story you've lived." I looked at my hands. They were creased maps that led to every place I'd ever lifted something heavier than I thought I could. "I can work with that," I said. When we left, the Phoenix heat hit us in the teeth. The sky was a hard blue plate. My phone buzzed again, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened in the shade of a mesquite. "Henry," Linda said, "they're coming by this weekend to measure the counters. I thought you'd want to know we're making it nice. Maybe you finally did one smart thing by leaving." She waited for me to bite. I didn't. "Enjoy the cabinets," I said quietly to no one. "They're going to look beautiful when you can't sell them." Grace squeezed my shoulder. "Phase 3 is going to be something," she said. In the hotel room that evening, I took out an old notebook I'd kept in a toolbox for years. The first page was a grocery list from 1996. The second was a sketch of a pergola I'd built with Mason one summer before he knew how to hate me with his whole mouth. I added a new page, names of people who knew who I was when the papers didn't agree. The foreman who paid me cash when paychecks were too dangerous. The church lady who kept an envelope of emergency bills taped under a drawer. The neighbor who brought casseroles and never once asked where I came from. Grace looked up from her laptop. "You cataloguing your saints?" she said. "I guess," I said. "Good," she said. "Courts like saints." I slept better that night. Not good. Better. The HVAC clicked less like a threat and more like a song trying to remember its tune. I dreamed of a porch swing I never built and the sound it would have made on a windless night. By morning, we had a date circled on a calendar for a walk-through at a title office in Tempe. Grace smiled at the circle like it was a doorway. "All you have to do is walk through," she said. I nodded and practiced breathing. The day before the title office meeting, Phoenix decided to prove it was August by setting the sidewalks on simmer. I walked anyway, because moving felt like telling my blood I had not resigned. Grace had calls, Ben had forms, I had a loop around the block and a bottle of water that warmed faster than a memory. On the third lap, my phone rang. "Ethan." I answered because sometimes you need to let poison hear its own voice. "Dad," he said, with a politeness that cut sharper than his laughter. "We're going to handle this quickly, okay? I've got a buyer who's ready to move. Cash. We'll settle Mom into a condo in Scottsdale where she belongs. You can, I don't know, figure things out down there." "Down where?" I asked. He paused. I could hear the kitchen echo in his phone. "Wherever they sent you," he said. "Look, it doesn't matter." "It matters to me," I said. "Everything matters to you," he snapped. "It's exhausting." "We'll see each other tomorrow," I said, and ended the call before he could turn my name into an insult. Back in the room, Grace was running through a checklist with Ben. IDs ready, originals and certified copies, witness statements. She had a way of turning tenderness into administration. It was a kind of love I had never expected to need. It felt like someone had grafted a back onto me at 78 and told me I could stand straight again. In the late afternoon, I took my old notebook to the lobby and called the names I'd written down. The foreman, Earl, answered on the second ring and told me he still had a Polaroid of the day we poured the high school gym foundation. He said he'd come to court in a heartbeat. The church lady had passed, but her daughter remembered me as the man who fixed their fence for free when a storm tipped it over. The neighbor moved to Flagstaff, but said he had receipts and would email copies. Every time someone said, "We remember," I felt something inside me refuse to die. Evening brought a text from an unknown number. Nora, 3 paragraphs sharp as nails. She called me selfish. She said I owed Linda everything. She said I had ruined their lives by insisting on being complicated. The last line read, "You were never really a father, just a cautionary tale." I typed and deleted a reply 6 times. Grace took the phone from me, read, and placed it face down on the bed. "Let her talk to herself," she said. We ate cheap tacos and watched a Hotel Channel loop photos of the hotel we were already in. I laughed. Grace smiled like she hadn't heard me laugh in months. "There he is," she said. At dawn, I ironed the one shirt I had that didn't look like it had survived a war. Grace braided her hair like she was going into one. Ben texted, "Go slow. Speak soft. Let paper do the shouting." I nodded to the screen as if Ben could see me. The title office smelled like air freshener and forms. The receptionist had a name tag that said Jen in cheerful letters. She offered water like we were guests at a house where nothing bad ever happened. They arrived 15 minutes late, Linda first, then Ethan and Nora flanking her, Mason behind. They were dressed like real estate listings, sleek lines, distressed hearts. Linda's eyes slid across me like I was the shadow of a man she once knew. Ethan didn't bother to hide his satisfaction. Nora's mouth was a razor. Mason looked tired in a way that suggested it had taken him a long time to figure out anger was a stimulant, and now he was crashing. The rep ushered us into a glass room where everything reflected everything. I could see 3 Henrys from where I sat, and none of them looked like a man someone should cuff. Grace placed the folder on the table like you set down a newborn. Let's review ownership, the rep said, professional warmth set to medium. Linda smiled like she was about to congratulate herself. It's mine, she said. After 50 years, it's mine. Grace slid the trust documents across the table. Ben, already waiting by the printer with notaries who knew him by first name, joined us and set down certified copies like cards in a game that had only one outcome. I'm afraid, the rep said, adjusting her glasses, the record shows otherwise. Silence has flavors. This one tasted like aluminum and apology. Ethan's jaw tightened. Nora made a sound I'd only ever heard from animals cornered under porches. Mason's eyes darted to Linda's face like he was looking for the teleprompter. What is this? Linda hissed, managing to sound both offended and unsurprised. Protection, I said, from the day I realized I needed it. You stole it from me, she said, the vowels hardening into bricks. I built it, I said. The law says who holds it. Nora stood so fast her chair gasped against the carpet. This is fraud, she said. We'll sue. Of course, Ben said, kind, almost gentle, as if he were handing her a warm cup she'd asked for. You may attempt anything you wish. Ethan leaned over the table. How long have you been planning this? Long enough, I said, but not long enough to stop loving you. He blinked, as if love were a word from a language he refused to learn. The rep cleared her throat. Without the trustee's consent, she said, nodding at Grace, this property cannot be transferred. Linda's hands were steady on her purse. You are a small man, she told me. A diagnosis. I got smaller every time I made myself disappear for you, I said. Today, I'm here. We left them in the glass room with papers they couldn't sign. The hallway outside felt like oxygen. Grace wrapped an arm through mine. Ben exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since the Clinton administration. I thought of the HVAC in the hotel and laughed again. Ben looked at me with concern. It'll make sense later, I said. Outside, Phoenix was still August, but my bones felt like November, cool, bright, edged with the kind of air that tells you a storm has passed and another is coming. Threats began the way storms do in the desert, quiet, hot, then suddenly everywhere. First came certified letters accusing me of coercion. Then came a man in a polo who lingered too long by the hotel elevators. Grace watched him until he watched the floor. Ben filed responses with the ease of muscle memory. They can't win, he said, but they can make you tired. I knew tired. I'd worn it like a uniform for years. But this was a new fatigued, a lawyer's pace, a marathon of paper cuts. The trick was to focus on the finish line and not the way your socks bunched. One night, around 11, Mason called. He was slurring. He called me old man like it was a curse, and then the line went quiet while he tried to find a different insult, and the alphabet failed him. You ruined Mom, he said finally. You could have just left. I did leave, I said. I was removed. You know what I mean. I do, I said, and you don't. He hung up. I stared at the ceiling and wondered where my boy had gone, the one who used to hand me screws at the job site and ask me to rate his curveball. I wondered if a father can misplace a child in his own house and only realize it when a woman with a phone whispers to strangers in the dark. Grace kept a log. Dates, times, subjects. It looked like a captain's journal for a ship I never planned to sail. We'll need this, she said. Courts like memory to be numbered. We moved hotels to a place farther from the airport and closer to Ben's office. The carpets here were calmer. The windows faced west. I could watch the sun turn the sky the color of a bruise and then forgive it. A small mercy arrived in the form of an email from a local reporter who covered human stories that need a straight spine. She'd heard something. Courts have leaks like old faucets, and wanted to talk. Ben raised his eyebrows. It helps, he said. Public light can make roaches reconsider. I didn't want my pain as content, but I also remembered handcuffs clicking while a neighbor's sprinkler turned lazily in the morning sun. Humiliation in the dark hurts twice. We met the reporter at a coffee shop in Tempe with plants in mismatched pots and a chalkboard that promised cinnamon in everything. She had a pen and a way of waiting that made me talk. I told her about the phone call at 2 a.m., about the cuffs, about Grace's rope in the well. I didn't name the terminal on the other side. I didn't owe anyone that. She asked me if I hated Linda. I looked at my hands. I hate what she became, I said, and I hate who I allowed myself to be to make room for that. She wrote the line down the way people do when they understand they might be stealing a piece of you. But it's okay, because you are handing it over. The story ran on a Wednesday. The headline made me want to laugh and lie down. Wife calls immigration on husband of 50 years. Daughter holds the deed. They used a photo of my hands holding a coffee cup, which felt right. The comments section was a bonfire. I didn't read most of them. Grace read enough to tell me people can still recognize a betrayal when they see one. She showed me 3 notes from men I didn't know. Each said the same thing in different words. Me too. By Friday, Linda called. Her voice had lost its expensive finish. You humiliated me, she said. You did that, I said, and then softer. We all did. What do you want, she asked. To sleep in my house, I said. To forgive you someday without lying. She made a sound like someone trying to swallow glass. You're so dramatic, she said. You never could just be simple. Simple would have been not calling at 2 a.m, I said. She hung up. It felt like an era ending and a can tipping over at the same time. The following week, our petition went in. Ben's paralegal printed it like it was a flag. We gathered letters from old bosses and neighbors. The pastor wrote a line that made me put my head on the table. His hands built for us when we had no budget, and his back bent for decades so others could stand straighter. Ethan attempted a countersuit, a carnival of accusations with a weak-voiced ringmaster. Ben dismantled it with the gentle boredom of a man who has seen this show 20 times. Nora sent Grace a final text. Hope you're happy. You chose a side. Don't come crawling later, Grace replied with a period. It was the most complete sentence I'd ever seen. When the notice came, hearing scheduled, judge assigned, I felt a tremor in my knees that had nothing to do with age. You ready? Grace asked. No, I said. And yes. In the mirror that night, I practiced how not to flinch when a younger man calls you a liar in front of strangers. I practiced my own name. I practiced the sentence, I lived a life you can verify, because I had, and because verification is just the world's way of making you say it twice. The morning of the hearing, I woke to a sky that looked scrubbed. Grace handed me coffee that was more sugar than coffee. Science, she said. You'll thank me in an hour. We parked a block from the courthouse because I wanted a minute to hear my shoes on the sidewalk. The building was practical and unimpressed by human drama. Inside, a bailiff who'd seen everything told us where to sit. Ben arranged his papers the way a musician tunes a guitar. Linda entered with Ethan and Nora, their faces set like they'd coached each other on how to hold their chins. Mason was 10 minutes late, eyes bloodshot, shirt rumpled like he'd slept hard and without comfort. He avoided my eyes and then stared too long, a man trying on contrition and finding it didn't fit. The judge was a woman whose hair didn't move. She listened like listening was a profession that paid well. Ethan's attorney stood and performed. He alleged elder manipulation and undue influence. He pronounced trustee like it was a dirty joke. He brought up ambiguous dates, raised eyebrows at signatures. He tried to make Grace a puppet. She sat straight, hands folded, and let him exhaust his bag of insinuations. Ben stood. The room exhaled. He didn't swagger. He explained. He set time like a table. He put down documents and asked the judge to look at stamps and dates. He called Earl, who told a story about a gym and a foundation, and a man who showed up early and left late, and brought donuts when the concrete truck broke down. He read letters from people who had no reason to lie for me, people with nothing to gain from calling me honorable. Then I stood. I had promised myself to speak like I meant it, and not like I was replaying a tape. "My name is Henry Cole," I said. "I've lived a life you can verify." I told the judge about a 50-year marriage with love in it, and then, not enough. I told her about a daughter who never forgot what a hand looks like when it's reaching toward you, not away. I told her I was wrong to hide in my own house, wrong to keep peace by making myself a ghost, but I was not wrong to plan for the day when peace would be used as a weapon. When I finished, the judge looked at me in a way I had craved my whole life, like I was a person whose words mattered even if they didn't make anyone money, Linda testified. For a minute, I saw the girl I met at a bus stop in Yuma, a life ago. Her voice was softer, then it hardened, then it splintered. "I did what I had to," she said. "Sometimes," the judge said almost kindly, "the thing we have to do is the thing that costs us the most." The ruling came after a recess that felt like 4 years. The judge spoke clearly. The trust stands, the property belongs to the trustee, the attempted sale is void, the countersuit lacks merit, and the court frowns on weaponizing removal proceedings in domestic disputes. Court costs assigned to the plaintiffs. I didn't cheer. I didn't even smile right away. I put my hand on the table and felt the grain like the inside of a hymn. Grace squeezed my shoulder. Ben nodded once, a man crossing a finish line he'd crossed before and still respects. Outside, the reporter waited, pen ready. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Tired," I said. "Grateful. Angry in a way that I hope doesn't rot me." Linda passed by within arm's length. She didn't meet my eyes. I don't know if she was crying. Her sunglasses were expensive enough to keep secrets. Nora spat a word I won't repeat. Ethan said nothing, for once. Mason paused. He looked at me, then at Grace. His mouth opened. It closed. He put his hands in his pockets and walked away like a man who knows he's supposed to be somewhere else and can't recall where. That night, back at the hotel, I lay on my back and let my bones talk to gravity. Grace sat beside me with 2 bowls of microwaved macaroni like we were celebrating a birthday in a dorm. "You're coming home," she said. "Home," I said, feeling the word try to stand up inside me, a little stiff from sitting too long. Moving back into a house is not a parade. It's a list. Grace and I changed locks, took pictures of rooms that looked both familiar and staged, and boxed up items that felt like fingerprints of a life I'd already washed off. Linda had painted the kitchen a white so bright it could have interrogated suspects. The counters were new, so were the cabinet pulls. The cabinet contents were ours again, which is to say mine and Grace's, and older than anything Linda had bought to prove she could. We found the wedding album in a plastic bin in the garage, a thin layer of drywall dust on its cover. Inside, 2 kids who didn't know which way the wind would blow. I flipped through not to mourn, but to confirm that I had once been believed in by someone who later stopped. Neighbors approached like deer, slow, curious, ready to bolt. Some brought casseroles or pies, as if grief had a recipe and justice made you hungry. A retired teacher from 3 doors down said, "We prayed for you." I didn't know what to say, so I said thank you, and meant it. Bills arrived like always. Life had the audacity to continue. Ben handled paperwork like a man returning library books. The bank corrected names. Utilities were updated. Grace created a spreadsheet with tabs that sounded like lullabies. Settled, pending, done. The first night, I sat in my old recliner while the sun slid behind the fences and turned the backyard into a pop-up theatre. Crickets began their applause. Somewhere someone grilled meat with too much lighter fluid. I listened to pipes tick and thought of all the times I'd repaired these walls so my children could sleep without worrying about rain. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A photo of a moving truck and a caption, "Enjoy your empty place, old man. Must be great to win a house and lose a family." Grace saw the screen. "Block," she said. I did. The silence that followed felt like a field left fallow on purpose. The reporter's piece continued to circulate. A church in Mesa asked if I would speak about forgiveness. I said no, and then called back 2 days later and said yes. I stood in front of a room full of eyes and told them forgiveness is not a magic trick. It's a chore, a daily one, and some days you miss it and the sink stinks. People nodded like they knew the smell. Afterward, a man my age with hands like mine said, "My son hasn't spoken to me in 5 years. I keep buying him Christmas presents and leaving them on the porch." We stood together in the lobby and looked at the carpet until we remembered we were not alone. Linda texted once. "We should talk," she wrote. "About what?" I replied. "About money," she said. "About the kids." "There's a legal way to do the first," I wrote, "and no wrong made your kids cruel. That's on us." She didn't answer. Nora posted a photo of a restaurant mocktail with a caption about new beginnings. Ethan updated his LinkedIn with words like strategic and resilient. Mason went quiet. Grace watched but didn't gloat. It's difficult to be proud in front of your father's ghosts. On a Tuesday, I found an old drawing in a shoebox. A house, stick figures, a sun in the corner. The child who drew it had tried to make the windows look like eyes. In the bottom right corner, a blocky little signature, Grace. I put it back in the frame on the mantel where it had once lived. The glass caught the afternoon light and made a tiny heavenscape on the ceiling. That night I slept in my bed. The sheets felt like paperwork had finally been filed and approved. I woke at 3 to the sound of sprinklers. For a moment I didn't know where I was. Then I did. I lay there and listened to water give the desert something to hold. Paper was done. People weren't. Public opinion drifted like a dust storm, unpredictable and abrasive. An op-ed argued that family matters should stay private, which made me laugh so loudly I scared a bird off the fence. If only, I thought. If only doors and phones and vans and courts were private. Ben called with a calm warning. "They may try one more thing," he said. "A story, a spin, a plea. Be ready to hear a past you recognize and a version of it you don't." 2 days later, Linda asked to meet. "Not at the house," she said. "At a park where we used to take the kids to burn off sugar and turn knees green." Grace did not like it. "I can sit in the car," she offered. I told her I needed to hear this without witnesses. "Call me," she said, "every 15 minutes, like high school." The park had new equipment and old trees. I sat on a bench with a plaque dedicating it to a man who'd coached with patience and died with courage. Linda approached in sunglasses and a blouse that tried valiantly to say she was fine. She sat without saying hello. "You humiliated me," she said right away, as if we were pressing play on a chorus. "We did that to each other," I said, "in different ways. I called," she said, lower now, "because I couldn't stand it. The waiting, the way everything depended on you, all those years of not knowing if today would be the day someone knocked. Do you think that didn't happen to me, too? I can't forgive you for putting that fear in our house." I looked at the playground, at a child on a slide who didn't yet know what an envelope marked immigration could do to a kitchen table. "I'm sorry for the fear," I said. "I'm not sorry for being who I am." "You could have gotten papers," she said. "Like paperwork is a vending machine and not an ocean." "You think I didn't try?" I said, tired and not hiding it. "You think I enjoyed living in parentheses so you could live in a sentence?" She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red. "I wanted safety," she said. "You gave me a life with holes in it." "I gave you a house with a roof that didn't leak," I said, "and a man who didn't leave until you made sure he did." We sat with the wind for a minute. "They hate you," she said finally, meaning our older three. I know, I said. Hatred is a fast meal. It fills you and leaves you starving. You always have to sound like a book, she said. It's my one trick, I said, and smiled, and then stopped because the moment didn't deserve that much grace. She stood. I don't know how to be the villain you've made me, she said. You called the police, I said. If the shoe fits, maybe it's because you bought it. She put her sunglasses back on, which felt like the end of a scene. Goodbye, Henry, she said. I watched her walk away. She stopped by the swing set for a second, as if to touch a memory. But she didn't. She kept walking. I waited until she turned out of sight before I let my chest shake. Grace was furious when I told her not because I had gone, but because Linda's pain still tangled with mine. That's how they keep you, she said, with a ribbon of almost apology. She's not a monster, I said. She's not a victim either, Grace said. She's a woman who made a call. The next day, a letter arrived from a law office with a name that sounded like a firm that helps rich people stay richer. It was an offer, a settlement for emotional distress. It read like a doctor's note excusing bad behavior. Ben advised we accept nothing that made the record blur. We declined. The silence after felt like choosing a hill and building a house on it. At dusk, I stood in the backyard and watched a storm climb over the South Mountain horizon, lightning fidgeting at the edges. I whispered a small, impolite prayer, not for revenge, just for truth to carry the same weight in their mouths that it carried in mine. People asked me to speak. Libraries, churches, a union hall in Glendale that smelled like coffee and boots. They wanted to hear how to forgive without erasing. I didn't have a curriculum. I had a story and the willingness to stand in front of strangers long enough for them to find themselves in it. At the union hall, a woman with a braid as thick as a rope stood and said, "My daughter told me to choose her or my husband. I chose them both and lost them both." We paused while the room made space around her pain. I said, "Sometimes our choices are bad, and selecting between them is just choosing the shape of our regret." Grace said I sounded like a therapist. I told her I was just a man who had spent a lot of nights talking to ceilings. Money wasn't a hero, but it stopped being a villain. With the trust intact, we rented the house to a family who needed a yard more than we needed empty rooms. We moved into a small place nearby with good bones and cheap light. Grace called it a reset. I called it a mercy. The rent check each month felt like proof that you can live off the interest of a story you survived. One evening, Mason texted, "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen long enough for the message to feel like a bird that might fly if I moved too fast. We met at a diner off McDowell, a place where the ketchup bottles are sticky and the waitresses call you Hon, whether you're old or 12. He looked older than his age. He looked like a man who'd lost a game and wasn't sure which one. He ordered coffee and didn't touch it. "I thought you were the enemy," he said without preamble. It was easier. Mom made it so simple. "Ethan, you know how he is with certainty. Nora," he stopped. "I said things I can't unsay." "You can put new words in front of the old ones," I said. He shook his head. "I don't deserve that." "None of us do," I said. "That's not the point." He used both hands to rub his face. "I called a number on a man who used to take me fishing," he said, choking. I didn't call them. But I stood there while she did. I didn't reach for him. I let the air carry his confession where it needed to go. "What do you need?" I asked when he could hear me. He swallowed. "I need you to say I can come back." "You can come to dinner," I said. "Every Thursday. If you stop, the chair stays there. If you start again, it's still there. That's the deal." He nodded like a man offered water after insisting he wasn't thirsty. "Okay," he said. "Okay." Grace didn't cry when I told her. She made a grocery list that could feed 4. "Nora will be last," she said, as if predicting weather. "Ethan is married to his pride. People leave their spouses all the time," I said, only half joking. We set a table on a Thursday. Mason came. He brought nothing but himself. It was enough. He ate like a man who hadn't trusted a fork in a while. He said thank you like someone practicing a new language. When he left, he hugged me. He smelled like cigarettes and apology. That night, I slept without waking at 3. The sprinklers still came on, but I didn't hear them. Repair is not a staircase, it's a trail that doubles back. 2 weeks after Mason's first dinner, Ethan sent an email through Ben's office, a masterpiece of passive voice. Given recent events, it began, it may be prudent to reconsider certain allocations. Grace printed it and wrote across the top, "No, we filed it like you file a mosquito bite, annoying, inevitable, already fading." Nora posted a photo of a sunset with a caption that said, "Some endings are beginnings in disguise." Grace rolled her eyes. She's writing fortune cookies now. Linda mailed a card with a picture of a flower that looked like it was trying too hard to be gentle. Inside she had written, "I hope you're well. I miss the porch. I forgive you." The word forgive rattled around my mouth like a coin. Grace saw my face and said, "You know, forgiveness is not a stick you use to hit people with." I put the card in a drawer that had nothing important in it. Then came the call that took my knees out. A hospital, an accident, Ethan's car, a light nobody stopped for, a miracle and a reckoning in one. He was alive and lucky and softer than he had ever planned to be. Grace said, "We're going." I said, "Of course." The waiting room was the same as every waiting room in America. Beige endurance, magazines about rich kitchens, TV tuned to optimism. Ethan lay in a bed with rails that insisted on their usefulness, bandaged and mortal. He looked at me like a man looking at a mirror and seeing he had aged overnight. "I don't want to die mad," he said. The words were plain and heavy. I might not die, but I don't want to be that guy. I sat. The chair adjusted itself like a polite robot. "I'm here," I said. He cried in a way that made the nurse close the door. He cried into his bandages and his pride. "I thought loyalty meant protecting Mom," he said, "and then I made loyalty into a religion. It felt clean to hate you. Clean and easy." "Clean can be sterile," I said. "Life is messy." He nodded, tears in his eyes and dried salt on his skin. "Do I have to crawl?" he asked. The question was a child's somehow. "No," I said. "You just have to come to dinner on Thursdays." He laughed once, a sound like a cough remembering a joke. "Grace making pot roast?" he asked. He had always liked pot roast. "Of course," I said. "She's a tyrant about carrots." He closed his eyes, opened them, and found me still there. We sat in that antiseptic room and negotiated our way back to language we could live in. When we left, Grace stood in the hallway and breathed like she'd just run. "Nora," she said, "we need a Nora plan." The Nora plan was simple. Do nothing. Leave a chair. Let time say what mouths couldn't. Weeks passed. Thursdays expanded. Mason returned with a pie. Ethan came with a sling and a willingness. We talked about nothing and everything. We left Linda out of it because we couldn't say her name without someone's voice breaking. On a Saturday, the doorbell rang. Nora stood there in a dress you wear when you want the world to believe you are fine. She held a brown paper bag and anger like luggage. "I brought salad," she said, as if we were colleagues and this was a meeting. "Come in," I said. She stood at the threshold for a second, like the house had its own rules, and she was trying to remember them. Grace took the bag, took Nora's elbow, kissed her cheek like they were still sisters instead of co-defendants. At the table, Nora didn't eat. She watched us chew like it was an exam. Then quietly she said, "I'm mad at Mom." Grace nodded. "Of course." "I'm mad at you," Nora said to me. "Of course," I said. "I'm mad at myself most of all," she said, and covered her mouth like she'd broken something. I reached across the table and put my hand palm up. She didn't take it. She put both of her hands around her glass of water, as if this was her last drink. "I won't say I'm sorry yet," she said. "I don't know if I am. I don't know what that word even means." "It means you're ready to stop hurting yourself with the wrong story," I said. She looked at me, eyes flashing, then softening. "I hate it when you sound like a book," she said. "It's my trick," I said, and this time I let the smile stay. The house we rented near 44th Street has a porch that faces west and a neighbor with wind chimes that may or may not be tuned to forgiveness. On Thursdays, the table fills. Sometimes all 4 chairs are taken, sometimes one is empty, and we set a plate anyway because hope is a muscle and you have to work it or it atrophies. Linda hasn't come. She sent one more card, no flower this time, just cursive that said, "I'm not ready." I read it under the porch light and put it in the same drawer where I keep elastic bands and batteries that still might have one good use left. The trust remains. The house we built became a house that houses another family now. I drive past sometimes, slow, a man acknowledging a monument that is not a statue. The new family's kids have a trampoline. Their laughter hits the eaves and bounces. I refuse to be jealous of their ease. I'm learning to love other people's joy, like it counts for me, too. At the Union Hall, they asked me back for a session on moving forward. I brought my notebook, the old one, with the grocery list from 1996, and the saints. I told them what I know, that betrayal compresses time, makes 50 years feel like a single dropped plate, that the opposite of erasure is witness, that love is not an alibi, but a sentence you say every day until it means something again. After the session, a young man with a faded ball cap said, "What do you do with the empty?" I didn't ask him to define it. I said, "You set another plate. You write a letter you don't send. You fix a hinge. You name what isn't there so it doesn't own you." Grace and I planted a mesquite in the small backyard. It will outlive me if the city lets it. We watered it with a hose that leaks a little at the joint. The wet spot in the dirt looked like a continent that changes shape if you stare. On a Tuesday morning, early, a knock came. Not the kind that arranges itself into fear, a human knock. I opened the door. Linda stood there with sunglasses in her hand and nothing to hide behind. "I don't know how to come back," she said. I thought of every sermon on forgiveness I had half heard in rooms with coffee in urns. I thought of handcuffs and fluorescent terminals and Grace's voice. I thought of a phone at 2 in the morning and a title office where glass reflected glass. I thought of a 50-year-old bus stop in Yuma and 2 kids with nothing but a plan to be lucky. "You don't," I said. "You come forward." She looked at the porch, at the new house, at the absence of our old life like a tooth you can't stop tasting. "Can we sit?" she asked. We sat. We didn't touch. We didn't apologize. We let the wind chimes talk. She said, "I wanted a certainty you couldn't give." I said, "I wanted a grace you didn't have." We both said, "We wanted out of our fear." "Can you forgive me?" she asked, the old sentence finally visiting our porch. "Not all at once," I said, "but I can start." She nodded, as if she'd prepared to be turned into a villain again and didn't know what to do with a project schedule that began with start. She left. She didn't ask to come to dinner. She didn't say she would. But that night, Grace set an extra plate anyway, and I didn't tell her to put it back. I don't know how the story ends. If you want an ending, you can borrow one I use sometimes, the way you borrow a jacket from a friend. Years later, the man puts his hand on a table and feels grain under his palm. He answers a knock, and it is not the police. He eats with his children like it's a sacrament that comes with side dishes. He forgives the woman a little at a time, and she forgives herself, perhaps even less. He lives in Phoenix, where the heat can make you cruel, and the storms can make you honest. He waters a mesquite and measures growth in inches, not years. He stops waking at 3. When people ask me what justice felt like, I say, it felt like my name said aloud in a room where I had once been invisible. When they ask me what love felt like after, I say, the same but truer. And when they ask me what to do with the empty, I say, set another plate.